So hello, everyone. Welcome. Today is day 3 of interview week. My name is Manisha. I'm the Director of Health Professions Advising. And today we're going to be talking about behavioral and situational judgment type interviews. So before I jump in to telling you what they are, I want to see what you know. So what do you think behavioral interviews are? Or an example, and what do you think a situational interview is? Or what have you heard about either? Okay, so possibly a scenario where you might have to play a role. Okay. Situational is like a CASPer, so that's an example. An example of a situational interview, correct? All right, so CASPer absolutely is an example. But in defining and comparing between the two, these are very common interview type questions that you might get in an interview. And I would expect both. It's not that one interview is going to be entirely one type or other than if you're doing something like a CASPer or preview out there. Beyond that, if we are in an interactive interview, these are types of questions that you might get. In terms of a behavioral interview, what we're looking at is for you to recall a past experience and what you did. This might start out with, can you tell me about a time, or when have you, or can you give me an example? Situational, you're going to be put in supposedly a hypothetical situation and asked, what would you do? How would you handle this? And again, putting together, from my, not necessarily, it could be from your experiences, but this is how I would handle it and why. So that's the difference. Situational, we want to also know why. Why would you do this way? Whereas behavioral, this is what I did. So again, a behavioral interview in its truest form is looking at how your past performance as an indicator of your future performance. So how you handled a situation in the past, what you learned from it as a predictor of how you're going to act or perform in the future. It's using these past events to understand, again, where your thinking is, what your past experiences have informed you. And this, again, different people have different life experiences. So what do your life experiences show you in terms of addressing the situation or answering this question? What they're looking for are examples. So again, AAMC competencies come back up, but your critical thinking, your desire to learn, grow, or change, or adapt, how you work in a team, how you are professionally. And this could be asked in a way of, an interaction that didn't go well, a communication that didn't go well, and what you got out of that. So it could be asked directly or indirectly. Do you take initiative? If you see a challenge, or if you see something that's slightly off, what do you go do about it? And your self-awareness, your maturity, your understanding of healthcare or life in general. But that's what they're looking at. These are the most common traits they're going to be evaluating you on. I'm going to pause there quickly before I jump into the next slide. Any questions or clarification you want on this? All right, we'll keep going. And again, just throw it in the chat, or you're welcome to call it out loud. So let's think about your responses. How do we handle these responses? You want to, thinking of an example on the spot can be very difficult. It could be nerve-wracking, right? Somebody's staring at you and asking you, tell me about this. And so in preparation, thinking about your application, thinking about your supplements and what you've already written, you want to reflect on experiences related to strengths, weaknesses, challenges, success, communication moments, communication that went well, communication that didn't go well, maybe a situation where you were ethically challenged, and think of how you would, what examples, maybe 2 or 3 different types of examples in your life, to help you showcase how you would, how you've done things. And so again, the goal is to not necessarily try to think of something on the spot, but come prepared with a few examples, so that then based on how the question is framed, you pull out the best example, and that's what you're going to show the interviewer. You can't predict what's going to be asked, but you can have anecdotes ready in advance. And so, for example, if you get a question, about a time that you had a conflict with a supervisor, the general example I gave you was, a communication moment, or a disagreement with someone higher than you. And so in thinking about all your experiences, if you've thought of 2 or 3, gosh, these are communication moments that didn't go well, you pull out the one that best fits this scenario. And there are types of questions that are very common, like I said, strength, weakness, challenge, success, ethical moments, good communication, challenging communication. These are all very common. And so you can be pulling from customer service, from your student job, from your lab, from interactions that you've had in any setting. And again, kind of then decide how we're going to lay out the answer. If you've been with me before, I'm going to talk about PARCA. Again, there are a lot of different acronyms out there: STAR, CAR, PAR. I particularly use PARCA to lay out a structure. There's no real formula, but if you think in terms of the listener's perspective, how you lay out your answer can help the listener absorb what you're saying and understand your reasoning as you're going through. So with PARCA, when you think about a behavioral question, something that's asking you to pull from your own experiences, think about, again, what was the situation? Very briefly, lay out the situation. What's going on? What does the listener need to know to understand the situation? What did I do? What was my role in this? What action did I take? If you were part of a group, you can start off, we were charged with, or our responsibility included, my specific task or role or involvement was. Based on what you did, what happened? You specifically, not the team, not the we, but from what I did, this is what came of it. What did I learn? Gosh, after the fact, when I, thought about the situation, what I realized was, or I was really excited or happy with the way things turned out because. So giving them a little explanation. And then if it makes sense for that specific question, how might you apply what you learned? In the future, what I would do different is, or based on this, I think given what the situation was, I handled it the best I could, and I would likely do the same thing, or I might adjust it a little bit. Or if it's appropriate based on the question, as a medical student, I might be faced this, or as a dental student, or as a veterinary student, or as a professional, if this were to come by me, what I would do instead or in addition would be. So again, the layout of the question is more so, one, keep you, to again help you reveal the details that are necessary and to keep you on task. How many of you are storytellers? Any of you, when you're talking with friends or family or colleagues, how many of you are natural storytellers? Okay. So you understand what I mean when we say storytelling, whether it's a good or bad. Storytelling is when you start giving out details and you're just sharing, kind of oversharing maybe, but you're just building it up, building it up, and building it up. What can happen if you do that in an interview? Yeah, you might take too much time. You might lose the point you were trying to make. You might go off topic. Absolutely. I am a storyteller. I've mentioned this before. I am very good at interweaving and keep pulling in. Oh, and that time, oh gosh, let me backtrack for a second. I have to preface with this. Oh, you know that other time? And so in an interview, imagine somebody who doesn't know you, who doesn't know much about you, listening to that. It's like, whoa, 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 what's going on? And it can be very hard to follow. And so in answering this question, it's really good to have a little bit of structure so that one, you don't go off topic, or I call derailing, or completely miss the train station, meaning I'm not even answering the question I was asked anymore, am I? And so we want to talk about what happens. You know, how do we get back on track? If you are aware that you've derailed, if you've gotten off topic, or if, let's start with that, stop. Just be brave and stop and admit it. You know, I think I got off topic. Is it okay if let me, or I think I got off topic. Let me come back to the question you asked me. An interviewer is going to appreciate that much more than you continuing down the sidetrack and then returning to the question on hand. They are so going to appreciate you admitting it, recognizing it. Because again, remember, what else am I looking for? I'm looking for self-awareness, right? I'm looking for your self-awareness. So an interviewer is very much going to appreciate you stopping, admitting it, and keep going. Now, let's say you're asked a question and you start talking and you realize, I don't think I'm answering the question. Again, be brave. Stop. You missed that train station. Stop and say, I'm so sorry. I don't think I'm answering the question you asked me. Is it okay if I start over? Again, admitting it is much more brave and professional and self-aware than going down that. Now, I have worked with, students or applicants that, I don't know when I derail, or I don't know that I'm off topic. And this is one of those times that I'm going to ask you to really think about, take those few seconds before you start answering and think about, am I answering the question that I was asked? Right? You don't have to immediately speak up when a question is thrown at you. That is not required. I, in fact, take a few seconds, I pause, and while it may feel like an eternity to you, I have timed applicants. I've timed people, who are doing mock interviews. It's really no more than 7 to 10 seconds. You just calmly, maybe that's a good question. Let me take a moment to think of an example that best fits. Even if you know immediately what you want to say, take a second. Plot out the first few points of your answer to make sure you're answering what you want to answer and you're answering the question. So one, if you know you've gone on track, stop, apologize, get back on track. Don't keep going down the wrong path and then trying to circle back. That's going to elongate an answer and just be super confusing for the listener. If you started answering completely wrong, again, pause, apologize, and ask, is it okay if I start over? This is how I would approach, and again, self-awareness and maturity and professionalism. That is what you're revealing in that moment. I'm going to pause there. Any questions on how to answer, how to approach, what to do if you get derailed, what to do if you just aren't even in the same ballpark. All right, and then I will keep going. So I wanted to provide you some examples of what behavioral questions look like based on maybe different competencies or attributes they might be looking for. So I want you to take a look at this list and, tell me what you think, thoughts, questions, concerns. But these are like common questions that you can prepare, whether it's, like I said, I like scripting out my answers. I put it aside and I practice. But these are topics and types of questions that you can definitely prepare for. But can you take a look at this, and does anything surprise you, or how what types of example would I want to bring in one of these questions? I'm also going to say, not asking questions or being quiet doesn't behoove you. The goal is to have you prepared. I know most of you are probably still in secondaries, but take a look as you're thinking about your own experiences. Is there something that's jumping out and you're saying, I don't quite know what kind of example I can pull up? And again, as I've said before, after we go through the formal presentation, I will stop recording and we can have a conversation if that's what you're waiting for. But just want to see if there's anything out of this in terms of adaptability, problem solving, teamwork, communication, values. A time you said no. Okay. So in thinking about this, you can think about this from a few different perspectives. This could be a work example, work, lab, student group. This could be an example where you're evaluating what's on your plate. You were asked, maybe you were in a student group and you were asked to take on yet another project. And you're like, no, I can't do that. I have, and again, explaining why. So going through it. So a time that you had to say no. Usually I think about, but I usually think about like in terms of what's on my plate. Does that help? Maybe if you've had to say no because I'm stretched so thin, just adding something in this moment. And I can't add, and again, that's me being self-aware of my ability. That's me being self-aware of my time commitments. That's me being aware. So another version of that is, tell me about a time that you failed. That's the opposite of tell me about a time you said no. Tell me about a time you failed. I go back to commitments. I failed because I had too much going on and I lost track. So that's how I might approach it. I've said no to family. In my role, I'm advising. And while I want to help as many people as possible, I sometimes have requests from not family, but friends of family. Can you XYZ for my kid? Or my kid can't find housing. And I'm like, I don't know how to help you. I might redirect you, but I cannot do this for you. And so I would lay out that example. So I thought that's a good one. And that's something that we're seeing in a lot of secondaries, a time when you didn't get something you deserved. And it's not necessarily about it sounding petty. Again, the focus of that is briefly set the situation. And then jumping into, I didn't get it. focusing on this is how I felt. And it's okay to say, I felt mad or upset or angry. And then coming back around to that self-awareness. I realized that, or after I settled down, I reached out and realized that I was missing, or I wasn't very clear on how I explained blank. So it's okay to feel bad. When people answer this question and try to bypass that whole emotion, they're not answering the question. You don't go from I didn't get this to, but I realized I wasn't in a good place to get it, or the candidate that got it had way more than me. Whoa, whoa, whoa. What happened in between? That's what we need to reflect on. And that's okay because that makes you human. So it is a hard question. It's meant to be hard. But the focus is on your self-awareness, that you were, okay to feel upset, and that you got over it and you stood back up, and maybe you worked harder, or you realized what you were missing or lacking and you worked towards doing all that. So you were stronger the next time. But that's the focus of a question like that. It's okay. It's okay to say, I was mad, or I was so upset. The example, indirectly, one of the examples I share is, just applying for jobs. It's like applying for jobs. I had found a job, I prepared for it. I researched everything about the organization, the school. I felt confident in my advising abilities. I was on my best behavior. I was Manisha with, taken down a little bit. I wasn't so extra, and I thought I had a good conversation with everyone, and I didn't get it. And I cried. I was mad. I think I chocolate ate myself for a bit. Then I worked out at the gym, and then I realized I did my best, and it's not always going to work out. And I turned around and I got a job in a few weeks later. But after going through that series of motions of feeling bad and upset and angry, it just pushed me in that case, like, I'm gonna get a job. I'm not gonna be jobless forever. I'm gonna get a job. And so I processed and I moved on. Do I still think about that job on occasion? Sure. But my career trajectory and path is what it is. It's what I make of it moving forward. Priya, what role do you assume when working on a team? Again, yeah, it can be challenging. And I think your response to it depends on the situation and what's needed. So then you would give examples of that. I always call myself, or I've called myself, a reluctant leader. I see how a team plays out. Well, I play two roles. I'm the caboose. I'm making sure I'm not always pulling it, but I'm making sure we're finishing it. I'm the wrapper. I wrap everything up and make sure we've hit all the marks. But I'm also a reluctant leader. If we're just disintegrating into this team's not communicating, I'll take the reins until we can get a move on, and then give empower everybody else. And so, yes, it can depend on the situation. And what makes this question stronger, or your response stronger, is how you give the examples you give of when you showcase these different moments. The moment of a reluctant leader, the moment of, I grab the reins, or the moment of, I like to empower people. Whatever it is, it's the example that you share is what backs up your assertions. I'm going to pause there, because we're going to spend the next few minutes talking about situational judgment, but anything else about behavioral before we move on? All right, and let's keep going. So situational judgment, again, they can be written tests, they can be asynchronous interviews, they can be part of an interview, mixed in with other questions, but it's a type where You're given a realistic situation and asked, what would you do? But not just what would you do, why would you do that? So they're evaluating you for your competencies, your people skills, what diversity you bring. So everybody has had different life experiences, which is what makes our why important. I would do this because this is what again, it's not answering a past experience. It's taking from my past experiences and applying it to this hypothetical. What my behavioral tendencies are based on my experiences. It could be maybe from growing up in a certain type of community, from the work experiences or academic experiences I've had. But it's asked as a way, hopefully to gain a more reliable and meaningful assessment of your personal competencies. The goal behind it is to promote diversity to an entering health professional class, meaning your life experiences are different than mine. At the end of the day, we're going to be released into the public and we have to support all these patients. We don't want 20 or 100 or 1,000 of practitioners that think and act and behave exactly the same, because that's what their life experiences have formed them. With all of the diversity we bring, that is what helps us engage with the patients that we're eventually going to see. Schools like these types of questions because it ideally gets a more holistic view of you. And then examples could be CASPer or the AAMC preview are examples of a written version of this. So really quickly about the CASPer. So standardized test that many health professional schools are using, not just medical school. You have 12 hypothetical stations. It could either be video or it could be written with 3 open-ended questions. Total time could be about 65 to 90 minutes if you take the break. And again, it's looking at your interpersonal skills, your empathy, and how you handle difficult situations. The nice thing is CASPer was created by the same folks that created the MMI. So each question has its own rater. So you're just being evaluated for that one question. And that rater is evaluating you based on how others responded to that one question. So if you did, if you don't feel like you did okay, that's fine. It's you move on. The next station is brand new. This, this could be a sample of a CASPer question. So I want you to take a look at this. And then maybe this was, or, if you've done CASPer, if you haven't, maybe it's one of the videos and, someone turns to you and say, what should we do? And then these 3 questions are going to pop up and you have 5 minutes to respond to all 3. My suggestion is read all 3, make some notes in all 3, and then go in and add details to it. 5 minutes is going to go fast. I wouldn't worry so much, 100% on grammar, just getting your thoughts out and making sure you have something in each box that's relevant to what that box is asking. But that's what's being asked of you. Any questions on this before we move on? All right, we're going to keep going. So then the next written situational is the AAMC preview. So a little bit about that. Right now we know, so one thing about CASPer and preview, something to be aware of, schools can add themselves to it. So just because at the beginning of the cycle on your school list, maybe only 12 of your schools needed it, schools can add themselves in to CASPer anytime. So just go back and look just to make sure that you do send the results to any new schools. But I know since it's come out, I've had a school add CASPer as late as January to this for CASPer specifically. So just keep checking. One of the applicants I'm working with said, she submitted, she's working on secondaries, already took CASPer, happened to be checking something a few days ago and realized one of her schools just added CASPer. And so she had to go back in and make sure the results were sent. So just be, familiar with this. In terms of previews using a structured rollout. The first year it was optional, 2 schools. The next year it was option, 2 schools required it, 3 more schools were optional. We're in the 3rd year now, where 18 medical schools. So this is only for medicine, whereas CASPer is for all health professions. But right now we know 18 schools are participating. And what I would say is read the question and try to identify what attribute they're looking for when thinking about what option to select. And so you want to think about it from a competency point of view. What competency am I being asked about? Now, with that competency in mind, you then think about what response best fits. So in this case, it's written scenarios that present hypothetical dilemmas based on situations you might experience in medical school. It could be related to healthcare, education, other settings, relationships within medical school. But based on the way AAMC is describing it, it's developed for pre-health students, so you don't need to know about healthcare. You read the scenario and then you sort of identify what possible action best fits. And you're rated, you're on a 4-point scale, 30 questions, 186 items. This is an example of a preview. Just out of curiosity, has anybody already taken CASPer or SJ? Anything you want to add that might help folks that haven't taken it yet, since you've actually experienced it? Did you find it easy, hard? Oh, this helps, here's something that helped me frame it.
I think what helped me the most with CASPer was like having a pen and paper and trying to outline possible responses just before they even ask the questions, because how they set up the scenarios, you can kind of already go, oh, I would do this, this, or that. And that way, when you do get the questions, you already have an idea of what you want to do and respond.
So before the 5-minute clock starts.
Right, just try to jot down like ideas of possible ways to go about it, because you see this scenario first. And like you said, you're trying to figure out what attribute are they trying to get at. So like going with that line of thinking, what are the possible ways or things you would do?
Thank you. Anything else anybody would want to share? All right, we're gonna keep on. So these are some, again, examples of situational questions that you might see in a one-on-one interview or a group interview. Different from preview or CASPer. So take a look at these questions and think out any questions, concerns, or how would I approach this? Any thoughts, questions? So again, in thinking about, the situation, think about, again, not necessarily like a behavioral where you're going to bring in a specific example, but you're going to lay out. So here's the situation, maybe the first one. If I were working on a project and I realized right before the deadline that I've been doing the project wrong, here's what I would do. And then you sort of just lay that out. Again, I'm not asking for what would you have learned about it? What would you do different? I'm asking you to just tell me what would you do, with the assumption that maybe you haven't experienced this. Now, randomly, you might also be asked about different types of learning. So when you're thinking about both secondaries, but interview questions, you could be asked what type of learning you would prefer. And then you want to back that up. In undergrad, I tended to do well in these types of classes, or I really prefer these types of classes because it allows me to, or through this, I am better able to. And so these do come up as a way to also understand, how have you prepared for your interview? What do you know about the school? How do you know you're a good fit for this school? So that's something you may also want to consider looking up if you haven't done so already, as you're both working on your secondaries and planning for an interview.
I have a question about this.
Yes.
So, for example, if you know that the school does PBL, but say that's not your preferred way, do you say we just answer honestly, or try to still, because it's kind of about like, oh, I know that this is what you do, but that's not what's for me. So how do you suggest going about that situation?
Usually I'm all about being authentic, but I think in this case, how would you make this work for you is how I would answer this. So not necessarily saying, I'm not really good at this, but this is how I would, ensure that I'm successful. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps a lot. Thank you.
Yeah. We don't want to say I'm not a good fit by any means. So,
Yeah.
so instead of like, I'll adapt myself, I wouldn't even answer that. Like, this is how I will make PBL work for me, or how I will ensure I am successful at your school, which is problem-based learning, and then lay out those steps. So that's a good question. I just think if you've been looking, again, this might be another moment where you, with laser focus, might go into Reddit or SDN. Again, laser focus, don't go into all the extra verbiage. But you are right, some schools lay it out clearly, some don't. Some might describe, instead of actually using the words problem-based or case-based, they might describe how their curriculum is taught. And so you have to sort of read between the lines in that case. Anybody else want to comment how they've been hunting down what schools are? But I would, look at it in the About Us, in any blog that might have current news, student life. It could be tucked in many different places. So I agree. It's not easy to find always. Yeah, that's a good one, Kylie, looking at course directories and just seeing what courses and what they're saying about the actual course descriptions. In this class, you will learn by being in groups to resolve A, right? You have to read what those words mean. They might not say you're going to do a case. This is a case-based learning class, but it could be in this class, you'll work through scenarios and come up with that's a good way too. So you just got to get really adept at hunting, seeking, or Googling. school and curriculum. All right, so just a couple more slides in terms of, again, just preparing, and then we can, sit with how do I answer different types of questions. We can come back to that, but, really quickly, again, a school isn't going to tell you, we're doing a behavioral interview, we're doing a situational interview. You will likely have a mix of questions throughout the day, whether it's one-on-one, you're part of a group, or an MMI. It really can be intermixed, the different types of questions you might receive. And depending on, if it's open or blind, that might also determine what types of questions. So you want to be prepared, and not think, oh, this is a one-on-one, I'm only going to get behavioral. We're going to throw in a situational just to see how you use those critical thinking skills and adapt to that specific question. Be prepared, right? Do your homework, have examples of your own experiences, or what life experience determines why you would do a certain thing. So kind of going back to CASPer, if you go on their website, the first example they use is a gentleman talking to a colleague about paternity leave and whether or not they should take it. And so people are going to have different opinions. I have kids. My spouse was not around for 4 months after I had kids because he had taken a job 100 miles away. My answer to paternity leave is absolutely, you should take it. Do not leave the newborn with one person. That's terrible. And I had twins, so I was very, very miserable for 4 months. Or the one about returning an item with no receipt. Someone who's had customer service experience, who's worked in retail, or different types of retail, and at organizations that had different philosophies would respond to this differently. That's what I mean about, life experiences might impact how you would justify what your why would be in these different questions or situations. Keep doing your research, what makes the school unique, and trying to turn that conversation into, or trying to turn that back and forth into a dialogue, engage your interviewer. Thinking about what's going on in the healthcare field you're planning to go into. What impacts dentistry is not what impacts vet med, is not what impacts optometry. And what the future of your unique health profession looks like, maybe based on populations you might be interested in serving, region you might be interested in working in, and coming up with those items related to your response. Always be prepared to speak to why you're a good fit to that school and to the field. And they want to hear specific reasons that you're going to that school, not in general, with the medical education that I will get at school X, I will be able to return to my community and provide culturally competent care. Do you think if you were a school and that was my answer, that you've learned anything about me? Right, Drew, very generic. So I should have named programs, named aspects of the curriculum, named opportunities that I would grow within that school to then become the type of practitioner I want. That's that, good fit where we're dating each other. I have to be able to show why this is a good fit.
I have a question about that real quick.
Sure.
So how excited could you come off to school? Because like some schools are very exciting, and I'm curious how you do that while still maintaining professionalism.
So part of that's going to be the way I would say is, what have friends, colleagues said about you? And the level of enthusiasm or excitement you typically demonstrate when you're excitable. I'm gonna use an example. My spouse is very low key. His level of excitement is probably this. And I'm like, oh my God, you're driving me nuts. Like, I can't tell if you're having fun or if you're like blah, bah humbug. And so we're on camera. We're going to use our whole body language. I think enthusiasm, we don't want to border on sounding fake or blowing smoke up someone's skirts. So a step down from that, a step up from bah humbug. I'm really excited at this opportunity. And when I was researching your school, what interested me the most was, I think that level is me. And I'm an introvert, interestingly enough, but I get super excited by little things. And so for me, it's coming a notch down, because we are at the, date one stage. They don't need to know all of me, the whole drama that I bring to the table right now. But enthusiasm is important. A smile, a nod. I can say the most enthusiastic words and be so exciting, but what does my body language show? Nothing. I could use exciting words. I'm so excited to be here today. I first was interested in your program because I'm using the right words, but again, so voice, body language, inflection, all of this is part of it. So Drew, since you asked that question, I guess my question is, when you think about yourself, do you tend towards too excited or in the middle or not so exciting?
I mean, I'd say in the middle. It's more just looking at some of these med schools. I feel like I could talk about some of their programs for a long time, and I kind of don't want to bore my interviewer with my excitement.
Got it. Okay. So the question is different. It's a combination of how long and how many points should I bring up. With the tell me about yourself, with the why this school, with the why physician, these are going to be your longer answers. These can easily go 3 to 5 minutes, easily. And so I'm not so concerned there, but I would say with the why this school, maybe pick 3 to 4 unique aspects. I would contain yourself between 3 and 4. And then, because the other thing is, you're not just simply saying, I'm excited about the opportunity to be part of student-run clinics again. You're also adding, in undergrad, I was part of Willow Clinic, and through Willow Clinic, what I enjoyed the most was. So to be able to redo that is one of the reasons I applied. You're giving an example to back up your assertion. That's what makes those 3 to 4 points go for 3 to 5 minutes. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that helps a lot. Thank you.
Okay. And moving forward, after the recording is done, we could, or the PowerPoint, we'll turn it off. And maybe if you're still around, all of you or whoever's here, we could practice, like, what ideas do we bring when we're responding to some of this. But just kind of to keep it moving, just remember, professional, courteous, enthusiastic. I am an introvert by nature, but I would call myself an introverted extrovert, meaning I can pull enthusiasm when I need to. But for me to do that, I need quiet time before to, it's like the Energizer Bunny. I need to like rev up. I'm on the whole time. And then as soon as it's done, I've collapsed and all I want to do is sleep. So know how you manage your energy level. This isn't necessarily just the day, what am I doing with the interview questions? It's being present. I had an interview once that was 6 hours long. It was 2 group interviews, a presentation, an interview with the director, a meal, and kind of a light meet and greet. And I just remember, I mean, I'm okay. So the end of the story, I got the job. But in the middle of the interview, they were giving me little breaks here and there. So I'd gotten through interview one, gotten through the presentation, had a break, headed to the bathroom, and I was melting. I was literally melting. And a gaggle of people come into the restroom. The kindest thing that happened is the first woman in looked at me and just, barked, "Back out, everyone. This bathroom's taken." It was, because I was like, I just am dying here. That was the nicest thing anyone's ever done to me, is to just let me have a space. But know that about yourself, right? You have to be on and off multiple hours at different points of your day if it's a virtual interview. And so know your energy level. Do your homework. Know, if you have 100 reasons why you like this school, as you're gauging the interviewer, pick the things that might inspire the interviewer to talk with you, to communicate with you, to engage with you. So that's another thing to look at. You may not know your interviewer, but as you're kind of answering those first few questions and you're watching their body language and their interest level, tweak your answers accordingly. You still want to be authentic, but you're trying to engage that interviewer. Having said that, MMIs are completely different. We're going to talk about that tomorrow. There's also something called stress interviews, where the interviewer was told to behave in a certain way that is meant to stress you. You're going to see that in MMIs more, but that's also like, you've got to have that self-awareness, but also be able to pull from yourself and keep your enthusiasm going. And we can talk more about that, but to just wrap this up, types of interview questions you might see. This is the same slide the last few days. And again, things that you might want to be prepared for and have examples in your head for, because these are behavioral in nature or situational. And that's it. So thank you for joining me. I will hang out for a little while just to answer questions. Let me turn the recording off.